Well, Quinn sent out the invitation for the webinar in November, and he said it would be fun and educational. Well, I hope it's educational, so we'll go for 1 out of 2. But we're going to talk a little bit about what to include in the reports, filling out the budget report, and then any questions you might have. And as Quinn said, please just ask questions as we go along.
All right.
There we go. Did someone else join?
Yes, no? Jessica with Region 3.
I'm sorry, who was it?
Jessica with Region 3. Oh, sorry, I was trying to get in and it kept not responding. So okay. I'm finally in.
You're in. Good. Thank you.
Yep.
We're just getting started. I'm just going to start the PowerPoint. So we're just getting started. So today we're going to talk about the prevention strategies inventory and the budget that goes with it, and also our community outreach form. Just to give you an idea, there's a lot of data in the Youth Suicide Prevention Project for Nebraska, and this just gives you an idea about where the data comes from, what data instruments we use. Then we kind of process it or evaluate it here at the PPC, and then where the data goes after that. So today it's the behavioral health regions, and you all submit the prevention strategies inventory, which I just see I misspelled on here. The PSI, and also we would like you to submit the community outreach form. They come to us, and then from here we send them on. The PSI information goes to the cross-site evaluator, and then the outreach information goes to SAMHSA, and also we use both sets of information to give information to the project management team. So. And Mark, you were going to say a little bit about why the data is important.
Yep. So as everybody knows, there are always requirements for data and evaluation in these federal grants. And so for this one, the Garrett Lee Smith, they're looking for process data. And so they want to know what kinds of strategies are being used in each of the grant locations, and how the money is being spent, and then how many people you're reaching with your messages. So all of this information gets collected from you out in the field. It comes into the state level here. We compile it, and then we report it to the cross-site evaluation. And so from the perspective of evaluation, if it's not reported, it really didn't happen. So there are people within SAMHSA, there are people in the cross-site evaluation, and then there are people in other states that are interested in what these strategies are and what different grantees are doing. And so all of them are looking through this information to see how it can be useful to them. So for the grant requirements and to keep that funding flowing and to meet the requirements of the cross-site evaluation, all of this information is important to collect and to collect it accurately. They have kind of their way of reporting, and they have checks and balances to make sure it's reported that way. So sometimes we're in the middle, you know, trying to interpret what the national evaluation requires and what information is needed to populate that. So we're kind of in the position of helping you all get that information in the way that they want it, and then shooting that up the pipeline. And when we don't send it to them the way they want it, they tend to ask questions of us, and then we have to go back and ask questions of you. So hopefully through this webinar, we can help explain what those requirements are, so we have fewer data errors and there's less of that kind of back and forth.
Okay, thanks, Mark. There are some resources that can help you with your reporting, and those were sent out yesterday or the day before with the reminder email. from Quinn, and I think also there are things that you probably have had before, but we'll just go over them really quickly. We did send out a hard copy of the PSI form because sometimes it's nice just to be able to look at it and read it. And then there's the PSI tip sheet, which has the strategy definitions on it. And the sub-grantee PSI and PSI budget directions, that came from the PPC, and that's just a Word doc. And the community outreach form is an online form, but we just copied and put the questions in a Word document so you could just kind of see what it is before you actually go in and do the online form. And then the Behavioral Health Region Community Outreach Form directions as well were sent out yesterday. And for data entry, we use the Excel tracking spreadsheet for the PSI, and that's something that was developed by the cross-site evaluator. I think it's a pretty neat tool. It does, sometimes it can be a little unstable, so I just would recommend saving often when you're entering in it, just so you don't lose much if something does happen to that spreadsheet. And if your spreadsheet ever starts acting kind of funny, just ask me and I'll send you a new one. That way you kind of have a fresh spreadsheet. Sometimes I think with all the macros in there, it gets a little weird. So and then we have the budget quarterly report spreadsheet that the PPC developed that you report your budget information. That's just an Excel spreadsheet also. And then the online community outreach form that I had mentioned earlier. So the PSI is really kind of the big thing that you report. And it's an inventory of suicide prevention strategies that were either implemented or developed in the quarter. And they would like you to report the new strategies each quarter. You wouldn't report the same, like if you were just continuing doing the same thing, you would not report that each quarter. And this is something new. Before I had asked or said that you could just add to your spreadsheet, update it, and send it to me each quarter. But then I found out that it's really hard for me to tell what's the new strategy and what's the old strategy. So if you would, please start a new spreadsheet each quarter. Just open the spreadsheet, enable the macros, and save it with your behavioral health region name and quarter. So you'll just have one spreadsheet for each quarter, and I think that will help on this end a lot, because we can't just pass those on. We have to actually re-enter your data in another spreadsheet just like the one you use. But so when I'm doing that, it would really help if I knew exactly what was the new data. And this is just a screenshot of what it looks like, the PSI, and I think you're all familiar with that at this point. So we add the new strategies implemented in the last quarter, and the PSI tip sheet is helpful in categorizing your strategies. And when you're answering the follow-up questions, I think that's where we have some kind of missing information. See the PSI form for guidance if you need help with that. But one of the main things is in your definition or in your descriptions, it's important to give a little information about maybe the activity, event, or product that you're reporting on, and also to make that something that somebody who's not from Nebraska or your area would understand. So don't use just a acronym for a local organization. Say maybe what type of organization it is or something like that. And so they have a little more information, because at the cross-site evaluation level, they won't know a local acronym. And as far as what to include and when to include things, for example, an event, you would include that on your PSI inventory after it's happened, not during the planning phase of the event. And for a product, after it's been created and you start distributing it, that's when you start including it, or that's when you include it. And then a good question to ask is just, is this strategy being used to prevent suicide? And that will help you decide if it should be something that you include on the PSI. And on the PSI tip sheet, there is on the second page some budget information that doesn't really apply to regions. Those percentages are something that the PPC has to report, so don't worry about that. And it also gives strategy definitions on the PSI tip sheet. And here's just kind of the general follow-up questions that are asked for training is the name of the training, the type, what populations did you target, and then what is the focus on current priority populations. And then the specific follow-up questions are going to vary by type of strategy. But I think the really important thing right now is the definitions, and to get those a little more filled in. And then save the spreadsheet and just email me a copy. And if you don't have anything new to report for the quarter, let me know by the due date. Are there any questions on the PSI? Okay. I think the budget spreadsheet maybe is the harder thing to fill out compared to the PSI. And also, we ask on the PSI that you just report what's happened in the quarter, but on your budget spreadsheet, you're going to be sending us your estimate of funds spent to date. So it's cumulative over the life of the grant. And so for year 2, quarter 1, which we'll report on when we get back from break, that ends on December 31st. So we want to report the total grant spending to date from October of 2014 through December of 2015, the whole first 5 quarters. So on that one, usually just rename and save your worksheet again each quarter, adding 1 more quarter so you have that cumulative total. But be sure to keep copies of your the prior quarter worksheets that you've submitted.
Hey, Terry, this is Ann.
Yes.
Okay, so what you're saying is when we put in our dollar amount that we have spent for this first quarter in year 2, then what we have to do is we have to add everything from the previous year.
Yeah, yes, we'll be reporting, it'll just be cumulative over the whole grant.
On that, do we use the same form that we used last year? So it just
I put one up. Can you see it? I put up a budget spreadsheet.
No.
Oh, is it on the screen? It's not on the screen yet.
I can't see it. I'm sorry.
Oh, can anybody see it?
You got to share the screen.
Oh, do I have to share again? Like just say new share? Oops. Is that right, Quinn?
Then click on the
Click on the
spreadsheet.
document. There you go. And then share screen. Okay, so I do that each time I go to one?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, now can you see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So here's the budget spreadsheet. And this one is just through quarter 3, my example. I just made a short example. But
Sure.
Here's year 2. And we'll just have to add on years 3, 4, and 5 after year 2. But yeah, we'll just, and so your total down here at the bottom is going to be, that'll be the total you've spent over the whole life of the grant.
Okay, so, but we just use the dollars that we've spent and put it in this year 2, first quarter, and it'll just add everything together.
It should add it up, yep.
Right, so, okay, so I was confused on that, sorry.
Yeah, you enter in the gray area and then it adds it up in the white area.
Okay.
So, and one, I think this could be helpful to everybody, but it's definitely something that's optional. But one of the regions shows the detail for what they're putting on this budget sheet in a separate worksheet. And so I think that can be helpful. For instance, we'll take a look at, maybe I don't think, right down here we have expenditures that aren't reported. They were our administration expenditures. But I don't really know, just looking at this, what's in that $244. So if you put in a little bit of detail here, like this is the $244. I just put that on a separate sheet, one for each quarter. And that kind of helps, I think, you keep track over time or answer questions that we might have if we get back to you. Again, that's optional, however you want to do it, but I think that's a pretty handy way to do it. And I started doing that on ours too, because it really helps me to look back and see. So I think that's really good. And I think in general, you all know, you just put the dollar amounts in the category in which you spent them. One thing that's a little tricky is if you have some planning. So here we had planning in year 1 that was, if I look at my detail, for CAMS training planning. And we didn't do the CAMS training until quarter 3. So what happens in quarter 3 is the CAMS training comes up into training. And again, I can't see the amount, but if I look at my detail, I can see that that's part of my total training amount. So I actually spent that CAMS money, or actually did the CAMS training in quarter 3. And so then I take it out of planning money here and put it up in the top. So I don't know if that's something that you've had to do yet, but that is one way to do that. Are there questions about that and how you handle things that are just planning expenses versus things that have actually happened?
This is Ann again. Sorry.
That's okay.
So if we are planning something like, and we plan it in the quarter to before, it would go down there on that planning thing, and then when it happens, we have to put that whole amount up on top and we take it away from the planning?
That's exactly right, because we can't count it as a strategy expenditure until the strategy happens. So this way you get it, you can have your total amount spent down here for the quarter, and it's going to include everything you've spent. It's just that you're not necessarily reporting everything in that quarter, and that's, if it's down here, it's not going to be reported in the quarter. It'll just be reported in a later quarter. Or perhaps like this line is never reported for us. We will never report that. But yeah.
Okay.
So, is that okay, Ann?
Yeah, I believe so. If I have questions, I'll let you know.
No, that's okay. I know the first time you do it, it even took me a while when I was figuring out my example. I had to look at it a little bit, but that's,
Okay.
yeah, I think that's probably the easiest way for us to keep it straight. But we are open to suggestions too if anybody has any. So that's always good. So again, oh, and also report what you've spent to date, but that's not necessarily the amount you've invoiced to DHHS. So those two amounts might be different. But just, we want to know what you've spent to date. So maybe you haven't already invoiced it all, but if you spent it, we want to know about it. And so rename and save your worksheet each quarter. And then, as I said, keep copies of your prior worksheets. So, okay, I think that's everything I have on the PSI and the PSI budget. Is there any questions on that before we look at community outreach?
Terry, this is Faith in Region 1.
Yes.
And I think that possibly our finance department has included comments in the cells and listed out in the comments what that entails. Is that okay, or does that mess it up when we submit it?
I don't think so, because again, I don't just submit yours on. I have to retype it in. You know, I have to put it. I have to combine everybody's together. So if you have little comments in there that would help, that's fine. Yep, that's good.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Any other questions?
Hi, Terry, I'd like to go back to what Ann was asking too.
Okay.
Are you, is it required that we put down what we're planning for? Even if, I guess what I'm thinking is, what if it's the plan and then something changes within the coalition and? Oh,
okay. Well, this is just the planning expenses. So if you haven't spent any money yet, you know, if you're, I guess if you spent time, staff time planning, it could go, still would go down. It wouldn't go as a strategy yet. It would be in planning. And then I guess you can't really take it out, right, Mark? I mean, if you've spent the time, I guess you've spent the time on planning.
So, Terry, like an example, just so I'm clear on this, if we were going to do an activity and we would put down a deposit for a venue or something, that would go in the planning.
Yes.
And then after we had that, activity or training or whatever, then it would come out of, if say this was in December or November and we didn't have the training until January or something. So it would go in this, and then next quarter it would be taken out and put it up on top when we had the training.
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
You got the idea. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Jeez. Sorry.
That's okay. I think I made that
You said you wanted to make it fun, right? I don't know.
I've made that noise more than once when I've been working on that. So, yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay. Now let's see if I can get back to where we were. Yeah. Okay.
I think you have to share this.
Oh, can everybody see it? Probably not. Do you see the PowerPoint again?
Nope.
No.
Okay. Sorry, guys. I guess I do this every time.
Yep.
Okay. Now I get it. All right. Okay. So now we're on to community outreach. We've developed an online form that you can use to report local outreach programs and activities. And with that, some of the things we ask that are not asked on the PSI are, how many people have you reached with your suicide prevention message? And we use a lot of other information on there, such as the zip code of where the activity occurred in our grant reporting. Sometimes we do GIS mapping of various things. We haven't mapped yet the activities, but we may be doing that. So that's why we ask for that. It is not the same as the PSI. It does seem very similar, I know that. And we've included a copy of the questions, but we ask the name of the region, the date of the activity, the zip code, and then we ask for a description of your activity. I usually just copy those right from my PSI. I just copy it and paste it into my community outreach form. So once I'm done with the PSI, then I fill out the community outreach form. And we ask also that you tell us how you estimated the number of people you reached. So maybe you had a radio spot. Then you would just check with the radio station and see the reach of that station, and that would be your estimate of the number of people reached. Maybe you handed out brochures at a health fair. Then you would estimate the number of people reached probably by the number of brochures handed out, or maybe there's a figure for how many people attended the health fair. We just need some kind of idea of how you estimated the number of people you reached with your activity or your product. And so usually if you report something on the PSI under the outreach and awareness category, then that's going to be reported on your community outreach form. And also there's on the PSI, there's the means restriction, there's the means restriction category. And if you have a public awareness campaign there or an activities event or product, then that would go on the community outreach form too. But training does not go on community outreach form. So not everything from your PSI is going to go on the community outreach form. So you're not completely duplicating what you've done, just a little bit of it. But as I said, if you use the copy, if you copy and paste your description, that helps a lot, because that's really the biggest thing that you have to enter on the outreach form. And it's okay, you know, on your, I know it's hard sometimes with everything that's going on, but if you want to fill things out during the quarter, you don't have to wait till the end. You know, you can add activities to your PSI form as you go along, and then maybe just do the community outreach at the end. It's kind of really up to you how you want to do that. Now, we can't here enter you don't need to submit the PSI information to us till the end of the quarter, because we can't enter it. There's just a window of time that we can enter that in the month after the end of the quarter. So that's why we ask for you to give it to us by the middle of the month, and then we have maybe like 10 days or so to enter that in. So, we talked about how that's different. And then here's the website address for the Youth Suicide Prevention website. That website has been updated. So that's our new updated site. And here's Mark and my information for any reporting questions you might have for the PSI or community outreach. And that's really all I have for today. Do you have more questions?
Terry, this is Ann again. I have a question.
Sure.
So if we got brochures and everything in the first year, and those are being taken to schools, et cetera, then how do we have to report every time we take things like that around, or how does that work?
Well, on outreach,
Mm-hmm.
you could, we would want you to report every time you handed out a chunk of brochures. Yeah.
Wow.
Or you could
Okay.
summarize. If you have, like, say you give them to people and they took them to schools, then I think you could just make one entry and say this many went to schools. And if you don't, then you probably don't want to hassle with the zip code of each school. Just put the zip code of your region office. Is that okay, Mark? And yeah, because we don't want to make it too much about teeny tiny details.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so just how I did, like one day I went to Columbus and visited all the schools and passed out youth suicide brochures and different things like that. And when I go to a meeting, I take stuff or make stops or whatever, so that you would want me to kind of capture that. Mm-hmm. On that outreach. Okay.
Yeah. And if you go to lots of schools, then you could capture that all in one. You could just kind of keep track of, for yourself, like, Columbus 100, somewhere else, 150, and then at the end of the quarter to say I took 250 brochures to schools in my region.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then I think you could, for meetings, if you have kind of big particular meetings, I think that would be good for us to know about. But if it's just a bunch of very small get-togethers, and Mark, do you think they could combine that one?
Yeah. So really the purpose of this is just to see how far those messages are being spread. So we're assuming that if you take brochures, all of those will be distributed. And then if you have meetings with, fairly large groups, that again is a way to capture the number of people that are getting that kind of message. So if you just met with like the guidance counselor at a school, that wouldn't be outreach. But if you gave them the brochures, then we assume that those brochures will be distributed.
Right.
If you have a meeting where 20 people from that school come to talk to you about suicide, then that would be an outreach activity, and you'd want to capture that you talked to those 20 people.
Okay.
Mark or Terry, what about just coalition meetings? Do you want that on the community outreach?
No.
Okay.
If we give brochures and stuff out at those meetings, like out of town?
I guess if the intent is that somebody would take those brochures to their constituency groups, mm-hmm. we aren't capturing that data from that person, then Terry, wouldn't we want to know that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But just going to a coalition, just
right.
Attending a coalition meeting, or we wouldn't need to know about. But
right.
If you took 100 brochures to your meeting, and people from the meeting were going to take those and print them out, then I think you could report that.
Yeah.
Okay. Good, because when I go to meetings, that's what I do, is take brochures and everything. And okay.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Thank you.
Mark or Terry, this is Jessica from Region 3. And I know we purchased some stress balls and some pencils, and I have taken the pictures of them. Are we supposed to put those in our PSI spreadsheet, or how are we supposed to document that and get that to you?
You can enter products on the PSI spreadsheet.
Okay. I know at one time we were supposed to take pictures, and I wasn't sure if the pictures are supposed to be put into the spreadsheet, or if I'm supposed to create a different document and do a description and write-up on that.
You could just email those to me. We usually collect those and submit them with the annual report for the reporting that we do, so they can see what products we're using. So just yeah, that's a good question. And anytime you have products, if you want to just try to remember to send us a picture of them, it doesn't have to be great either, just kind of something like that. Sometimes there's a proof of something that you're going to have in the paper or whatever.
Okay.
People sent us their video or their audio from their radio spots this last year to include with the annual report. So that would be great. Anytime you have any kind of products, just send them on and let me know what they were for, and I'll kind of collect them for the year.
Okay, well, I have some I'll send off to you today. I was just holding off until we had this webinar in case I needed to do something more with them other than just emailing it.
No, that's great. And, Ann, your question brought up about going to coalition meetings. I guess that's something that would be reported on the community outreach, but isn't reported on your PSI. So typically I said that, everything in community outreach on PSI or everything in outreach and awareness on the PSI gets reported on our community outreach form. And that still holds, I think, pretty much in general. But I guess there could be things that you report on community outreach if you do things like coalition meetings, because they don't want coalition meetings on the PSI. So.
Well, even if I just stop at a school and stuff, I can't, why would that be on the PSI? Wouldn't that just be on community outreach?
That sounds like just community outreach, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
So I hadn't thought about it going that direction, but there's going to be things that you might be doing in outreach for your community that you just don't put on the PSI.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So good, that was a good point.
And Terry, this is Sandy. I had asked about the coalition because I'll give you an example. In Lancaster County, they now have subcommittees. The coalition still, they meet at large, but we also have subcommittees meeting. So is that under community outreach? Because I would think you'd want that documented somewhere because it's time and effort.
But I don't know that it's outreach, because it's not really outreach. Would that be documented anywhere, or is that just part of?
Yeah, I don't think it's outreach, because usually the outreach is to kind of the general population or specific kind of stakeholders, and with those subcommittees, you're actually doing more planning work. So I don't know if that's captured anywhere on the PSI. Okay.
Not really. Cool. But you report that. I just read this last night. So you report the existence of your coalition, like when you set it up on the PSI, but you don't report your meeting. So they know that it's there. Like, so if those subcommittees are new, then report those sub-coalitions. Then we'd want to hear about, we set up a sub-coalition. But we don't need to have the meetings documented.
Okay, and I'm really not wanting to complicate it.
Okay.
Those subcommittees, they are actually, and I guess I'm thinking of the majority of them, they are doing some outreach in the sense of, for example, with one of the subcommittees, the campaign, the awareness with community, obviously that goes on it. But another stakeholder would be, they're pulling in the city council and the mayor's office. They pulled in the parking garages. So there is, specific outreach going on with some of that subcommittee group. And if you're fine with that I'm fine with it too. I just don't want to miss something.
Yeah, I think we could update the description of the group.
Well, and if they were doing an outreach activity, so if they had subcommittees out there distributing brochures, or they're talking to groups, that's the kind of information that would be good on that outreach, because they are actually reaching out to other groups. But the subcommittee itself isn't. So when they meet, you wouldn't count, they had a meeting of 10 people as a subcommittee. But if they were going out and doing presentations to public groups and distributing brochures, that would be information we'd want to capture.
And if, and we can update, Sandy, I remember when we put in the definition or the description of the coalition in Lancaster County, and so if the participants of that coalition have, if we are including different kinds of participants, as you said, they pulled in the mayor's office and stuff. We can update that definition. I can go in and update that when I go into the PSI, but it might not be a whole new entry. Yeah. So we can talk about that as it comes up if you want.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that would be good. And then that made me remember too, what happens when we submit the PSI is over the next quarter, the cross-site evaluators go over it. And if they find anything that they don't think is in the right place or they need more information, then they give me a little report during the next reporting period, because I can go in and make the changes that they've requested. And I think we've got, what is it, 125 or something entries in our PSI. And I think we only had maybe 3 things I had to just, and that was because I maybe had categorized them wrong or something. So I think we're doing really good. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what we're shooting for, is to not have them, come back to us with questions. So any more questions? Okay. Well, that's all I have. So thank you everybody for doing the Zoom webinar today, and happy holidays to everyone. Have a nice break.